Indonesia's presidential power struggle is spinning dangerously out of control. Some protesters are working with those who want the country's first democratically elected leader dismissed. Others part of an organisation that vows to defend him at all costs. But both sides are now using chaos and violence as political weapons in a calculated battle over the presidency that's being waged on three fronts. A parliamentary impeachment that could see the president sacked by June. A deadly, unprecedented bombing campaign in the Javanese heartland. And the military's deliberate use of violence in war-ravaged provinces like the Moluccas. Blind, frail and erratic, Abdul Rahman Wahid's administration is flawed, at times compromised by some of those he relies on. But from all of Jakarta's political elite, Wahid is so far the only leader who's shown any sign of wanting to take Indonesia in a new direction.
If it's time, it can be changed any time. You know? Trying to make me step down from the presidency is very dangerous for the democratization process we have.
Mother of three, Maria Edliger, is among 1 million Indonesians forced from their homes by what appears to be ethnic and religious hatred, but which often has its roots in deliberate provocation. She was among 800 Christians threatened with death if they refused to convert to Islam.
Itu keluarga semua habis. Saya juga habis dalam arti bahwa kita dibunuh. Begitu kalau bertahan dalam iman. Tetapi setelah kita masuk itu, kita punya perasaan dan kita punya iman itu tetap hanya satu saja Tuhan.
She fled their remote island home of Kasui with her family, but could not save herself nor her 75-year-old mother from a barbaric mutilation forced upon them as a sign of their new faith.
Dia suruh buka paha itu langsung ambil sirip lalu potong itu kami punya kemaluan itu. Ada yang sampai sudah putus sekali, sama seperti mereka juga sunat waktu mereka kecil. Jadi waktu itu sementara potong putus itu darah paling banyak sekali. Karena saya sebagai orang Kristen itu tidak begitu, tapi karena mengalami sunat itu rasa-rasa
Such chilling intimidation may not seem a political act, but it is. For the deadly religious war that's divided Ambon has been unleashed and deliberately perpetuated by factions resisting reform in Jakarta.
These people consist of the former generals, politicians, former ministers, and other former officers from Suharto time, who fight for their interest, for survive.
It's here in Ambon, these military-backed politicians, the so-called dark forces, have been most successful in undermining elected government. These extraordinary pictures from August show Indonesian troops, supposedly here to hold the peace, leading a Muslim attack on Christians. They even fire on Christian positions to cover the Muslim advance.
Sometimes you have had snipers killing the right number of people from both sides. So if they shoot 10 people from the Muslim village, then they will also kill 10 people from the Christian village, and thereby the people had to continue the fighting just to take revenge for the slain brothers and sisters.
George Adijondro, a specialist in the murky links between sections of the military and Suharto's old guard politicians, says they last year helped the arrival of thousands of Muslim fighters from Java.
When the Ambonese themselves were already trying to reconcile, and there was a kind of status quo, then the military helped the militant Muslim forces to organize the Laskar Jihad, give them training in Bogor, and eventually did do nothing to hamper them from sending thousands of their members to Ambon.
The army insists these troops are often just Muslims or Christians caught up in the emotion of a religious war. But with 4,000 people now dead in and around Ambon and violence spreading to other parts of the country, human rights investigators have a more sinister explanation.
If there is a riots, the government will collapse. In that kind of situation, everybody will looking for the military, and the military will step in. If there is a military or authoritarian regime, of course, we didn't expect them to prosecute their friends, their seniors, or their allies.
For years kept to the provinces, the campaign of deliberate violence has now been brought to the capital, Jakarta. Bombs have exploded at the stock exchange, a mosque and even a diplomat's house, always coinciding with an attempt by Wahid's government to question an old Suharto crony or family member over corruption. And last Christmas Eve, in a dramatic escalation of this campaign, 18 died and 120 people were injured when bombs ripped through 18 churches across Java and Sumatra. The aim was to provoke religious riots across the country. An immediate investigation led by Indonesia's Human Rights Commission found criminals and Islamic extremists had planted the bombs, but in a report yet to be released, they found the bombers had been organised and paid by members of Suharto's old regime.
The old regime, the element of the old regimes, military and also politician.
Can you name names?
Not yet.
But former ministers?
Former ministers.
If there are hard evidence or data that leads to the fact of such circumstances, I think we will take actions and upon those soldiers. But until now, we do not have any findings that lead to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm. So you're convinced that there's no active sections of the military actively involved?
No.
Apapun ucapan presiden.
Asmara Nababan's investigators are frustrated. Because there's still no judicial action, for legal reasons they can't yet release the names of those they believe masterminded the bombings. But they do have phone records linking at least one former Suharto minister to the attacks. Fuad Bawazir, already accused of helping fund Muslim extremists in Ambon, represents Suharto's old guard, now under suspicion. There are some people who believe that you may be linked to those bombings over Christmas.
What is the reason, what is the proof, and what is the logic for doing so? You know, if any international agents or any domestic agent can give some indication or proof, if I'm doing that stupid thing, I'll be happy. But it's completely nonsense. That is only basically the character assassination.
A key public servant during the height of Suharto's kleptocracy, Bawazir was a minister and, before that, the director of taxation when Suharto's son Tommy obtained a tax break worth millions of dollars for a monopoly to assemble the national car.
And I have no information and I have nothing to do with this case.
But you were the head of the department.
Yeah, but first of all, that is directly instructed by the president and then handled by the minister. And even at that time, I was off. So when I get back, and then I got report.
Now back from holidays and rich, Fuad Bawazir has reinvented himself as an MP and a financier of the student movement against Wahid, a key figure in the return of Suharto's old guard.
Fuad Bawazir has currently been elected as the head of the HMI Alumni Corps, the national organization which controls most of the student governments in Indonesia, the BEMs. And you see that the BEMs are now at the forefront of the campaign to get rid of, to unseat Gus Dur from his presidency.
While Fuad handles the funding, another old Suharto crony, Arifin Panagoro, leads the political attack. Arifin heads Vice President Megawati Sukarno Putri's party in the parliament and is one of the most active in seeking Wahid's dismissal. What exactly is Gus Dur doing wrong?
Very simple to say, is the public accountability. That is the most important thing.
Joined by other parliamentary faction leaders, Arifin is today drumming up student support against the president and its fertile ground.
Ketua-ketua fraksi yang lain, Pak Hatta. Jadi kalau anggota DPR bicara tegas seperti saya, itu kejadian.
Many in the student movement that helped oust Suharto feel Wahid has failed to implement the anti-corruption and anti-military reforms they wanted. Yet, ironically, they're now being incited to protest by a man who embodies the corrupt system they fought against.
A lot of these people are worried that if you allow the process of investigation of the Suharto era corruption to go on, then they will become the victims. People like Arifin Panagoro, who were in the private sector at the time, they really made a fortune by including members of the Suharto family, of the Ginanjar family, and other dignitaries. So instead of just waiting to be investigated, they're now turning the heat on Gus Dur.
What do you say to some people who say this is the old guard just coming back to take power as an excuse against Gus Dur?
Oh yeah, this is complicated. If we talk about old guard like to protect themselves or like to do something against Gus Dur, we have to admit that, you know, it's a kind of revenge or whatever. But for us, sure, we are not belong to them.
In February, members of Indonesia's lower house gathered for a pivotal moment in the campaign to impeach the president. Among them, of course, is Arifin Panagoro, who controls the biggest single block of seats and is today out for Wahid's political blood.
Ya, lebih tegas lah. Lebih jelas. Dan sekarang akan sangat jelas.
Selama ini enggak ya? Selama ini kurang tegas ya?
Selama ini hati-hati.
Terlalu hati-hati.
Tegasnya itu mendukung atau gimana nih Pak?
Surprise, tunggu aja di dalam.
Surprise ya Pak?
Seluruh anggota fraksi Kebangkitan Bangsa menyatakan walk out.
Parliament's attack is based on allegations Wahid knowingly played a role in the misappropriation of about $6 million in government funds. But with scant evidence of personal corruption and no criminal inquiry before the vote, this is not really about guilt or innocence at all. It's a parliamentary numbers game, a game that Wahid is losing. With only 10% of the seats, Wahid's position is weak. He owes his presidency to a coalition of parties which at the time were anxious to keep Megawati from the presidency, even though her party won the election. It was Amin Rais who played kingmaker, on the surface because his coalition of Muslim parties couldn't bear having a female leader.
That support came with the understanding that Gus Dur would step aside in favour of Amin Rais and or his friends. But since Gus Dur didn't do that, so that understanding broke down. So the perceived strength collapsed. There was never that strong support in the parliament to begin with. What Gus Dur had was just support in the imagination and in the will of the people. So
his deal was that he would step aside for Amin Rais?
Yes.
When was that meant to happen?
That was meant either before the votes were actually taken or mid-term.
Ever since, Amin, boosted by Muslim opposition to Wahid's liberal religious views, has led the charge to oust the president. Many believe to give himself a better chance at the top job in the next election. And he's found eager partners in the coalition that elected Wahid.
It was a coalition government, and a coalition not between the progressive forces, but at least including two of the forces which were the strongest pillars of the Suharto dictatorship, the military and Golkar.
And that creates one of Wahid's biggest problems. Whenever he does pursue reform or prosecution for past misdeeds, he angers the vested interests that elected him in the first place and disappoints the public because nothing gets done.
The three major demands of the pro-democracy movement, and that is to try Suharto, to abolish corruption, and to return the military back to the barracks. But on all three fronts, Gus Dur has not performed.
It's for these reasons the combative Wahid often dismisses the Parliament's challenge and ignores its calls for his resignation.
Nanti coba lihat, kesini lagi masih presiden juga. Sampai habis masa saya. Tadi Bapak juru bicara Presiden, Pak Wimar Witular sudah jawab. Tanya yang sama. Kapan Pak Wimar turun katanya? Bersama Presiden, jawabnya Pak Wimar, ya saya dengan Presiden ini suruh dokter, bukan suruh turun jabatan, suruh turunkan berat badan.
While it might disarm supporters, Wahid's humour leads many to think he doesn't take the crises facing him and his country as seriously as he should. He's recently isolated himself from Megawati's support by denying her party a cabinet position and weakened it even further with the unjustified sacking of her party member, clean technocrat Laksamana Sukadi.
He has no harmonious relationship with the parliament. Number one, he is running a minority government. I mean, anything imaginable, can happen with the minority government. And he is not reaching out to the biggest majority fraction in the parliament.
Which is you. With his support in the parliament gone, Wahid came out fighting. To regain the confidence of the people, he vowed to speed up the prosecution of 10 Suharto-era cronies, including those from the former ruling Golkar party who stole billions in public money for personal and party fortunes.
People want to taste the justice right now. They deserve it. Because for many, 30 years more, they never taste the justice.
Taking justice into their own hands and their cue from the president's new resolve to tackle his enemies, this was the response of Wahid's supporters to the parliament's censure. Their target, the local office of the Golkar party. For 30 years, the political pillar of Suharto's corrupt dictatorship. It's this anger Wahid now threatens to unleash, and it can turn ugly, as witnessed by cameraman Jeff Clegg as the crowd decided they no longer wanted to be filmed.
Let's go.
As the flames engulfed this symbol of corrupt repression, these youths sent a message to Golkar chief Akbar Tanjung.
Yes. Fuck you, Akbar Tanjung. Fuck you, Tanjung.
Called the Bansa, these are members of the NU, a 30 million strong Muslim organisation Wahid inherited to rule.
Saya yakin dan masyarakat Jawa Timur yakin bahwa Gus Dur tetap yang benar dikatakan benar dan yang salah tetap akan dikatakan salah. Dan ini prinsip. Oleh karena itu kalau perilaku Gus Dur akan direkayasa oleh kelompok-kelompok orde baru atau kekuatan-kekuatan lain, ini akan kita lawan. Masyarakat Jawa Timur akan melawan.
While Wahid may not have ordered them onto the streets, he could have stopped them.
Kita hancurkan seluruh komponen-komponen orde baru, saudara-saudara sekalian.
And it was revealing that just hours before this riot, the president wasn't shy of using the tension as a warning to his hostile parliament. There's already been some incidents of violence in East Java, as you know.
Yeah, not only in East Java.
That's right.
Central Java, Central Sulawesi, South Sulawesi. I got the phone from Akbar Tanjung last night, and all were burning Golkar offices. So I said that you do your work, try to to set straight the behavior of the parliamentarians, and I will do my job. You see, convincing any people to, not to or supporting people to do their things. Yeah.
It's these protesters who vow to bring this violence to Jakarta if the parliament proceeds with the impeachment of Wahid. And while a coup is out of the question, the military is watching closely and will not rule out other options to reassert more control.
They will not use the masses as their political tools in achieving their purpose politically.
So the military could take or step in to take a more active role in dealing with a crisis like that.
Again, it will be, first of all, on the basis of a political decision, and secondly, guided by the authority laid down by the Constitution.
One constitutional way for the military to regain more control is through President-in-Waiting Megawati Soekarno-Putri. Having developed close ties to an army that's lost patience with Wahid's attempts at dialogue with the restive provinces, her government would return hardline crackdowns. Her party's vote for Wahid's censure means she has her finger on the impeachment trigger, but she's yet to publicly push for Wahid's early dismissal, perhaps because she is herself vulnerable over corruption claims surrounding her husband, Taufik Kimas.
From monolithic corruption to multi-party corruption makes it even worse.
Sections of Jakarta's media are already abuzz with the corruption allegations, and while none have been proved, as Wahid is finding, a strong leadership needs to be beyond reproach.
You have in the cabinet. She's practically a hostage of her husband, and that means that if she is promoted to become the president, then maybe in less than 6 months, she will be treated just like Benazir Bhutto. She will be kicked out from the presidency, maybe from the country, for the corruption of Taufik Kimas.
please, we've come a very long way. What's your key concern for the Indonesian people these days? As the daughter of the nation's founding father, Megawati is Indonesia's most popular politician. Her administration promises to be more stable than Wahid's, but many aren't sure what she really stands for. What's your main concern for the Indonesian people these days? Any statement at all? Rarely speaking to the media because she doesn't like being treated like a commodity, her silence makes her vision for the country a troubling enigma. Keeping everyone guessing, Wahid's survival now depends on her party's support in Parliament, but he insists she will not vote against him.
She will not entertain any kind of special session of MPR. Also Akbar Tanjung. So there's no danger of that anymore.
So no impeachment?
No, no impeachment.
But Megawati's support for Wahid does appear to be slipping. And with the growing clamour against him, this wily cleric must forge new power-sharing deals with her to beat an impeachment. But in reality, it's only just begun. With the nation edging closer to chaos and possible disintegration, Wahid's dismissal would strengthen the hand of a returning old guard, whose enduring control could continue instability for a generation to come.
No battle, because the battle is already won.
Thank you very much.
Okay.